Hopefully we'll get that. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about some actually local research. I've done research sort of all around the world, but ran into a problem here in San Diego at the US-Mexico border that has been here since the 30s, so about 100 years, and it's been being ignored. And so I'll give you a little bit of background on what sort of motivated this work. I've always worked on air pollution. When I became a professor, I was very interested in doing things that helped society. And in particular, aerosols. And at that time, people didn't know what an aerosol was. They thought it was the stuff that comes out of a spray can. But thanks to COVID, we've learned they do so much more. And so, and you can see them. You know, they're visible, as is shown in this picture taken during the San Diego wildfires in 2007, I believe. They are the #1 exposure route. We hear a lot more about being exposed to pollutants through water and soil, and far less about the air, even though we take about 20,000 breaths a day. I counted. So basically, the latest estimates are somewhere between as many as 9 million extra deaths a year worldwide. It's more than HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis combined, and 90% of the world is breathing unhealthy air. So there's many health effects. The thing about aerosols that was intriguing to me is when you inhale them, they're like a transport mechanism to get things to every region of your body. There is not an organ that is spared, including your brain, and some of the most recent health effects have been linked with dementia. And so, you know, there's just a huge amount of work showing how important air pollution is and how much it affects your health, but we know very little, especially about the things that I'm going to talk about today. So the challenges are increasing. We have standard air pollutants we measure. You hear about, when you hear the air is clean, you hear about ozone usually, NOx, sulfur dioxide. But basically, as our planet continues to increase in people, there's also many more pollutants that are getting out, as I'll talk about in a second. And so, you know, the ocean's changing, the water's changing, the air's changing due to wildfires, burning things that have never been burned and released into the atmosphere before. And so, you know, things are just getting much more challenging to deal with and address. And a little hint, I will talk about the water connection to air, which is a new one that we've uncovered in the last year or so. So emerging chemical, we call them emerging pollutants, but they're both chemical and biological. I wrote an editorial for Science magazine this year because I kept getting questions from people. I get email ever since COVID. I was the one that convinced Dr. Fauci that the virus was airborne. And so basically, I get questions all the time from the public. And they kept, especially after these fires in LA, people kept saying, is the air safe to breathe? Is it safe for me to go out? Is it safe for my kids to return to school? And the one thing you can look at is the air quality index. You all have that. You see it with your weather maps on your phone. The problem is during the LA wildfires, it went a little wonky because the air looked clean because the pollutants had blown out over the sea, some of them, the ones you can see, the particles. But the toxic gases remained, and that's what I will talk a lot about today, is how do we deal with these new pollutants? No one's even measuring them. They don't really want to measure them because I think if they measure them, they are now responsible for protecting people from them and saying what the health effects are. That's the skeptical side, but I've got quite a bit of evidence to back that up. The challenges are increasing, as was mentioned earlier, due to current governmental decisions to roll back regulations on these pollutants. So not only are we not measuring the new ones, or the newer ones, we are now stopping measuring the old ones. And so this is a very daunting task to think about how to protect people's health on a global scale. So a little bit of background on me. As I say, began my career looking at aerosols. Aerosols, as I say, are very visible, but the one big lesson is we share the same air. And aerosols can travel all the way around the globe. It takes about 2 weeks. That's how I got sucked into the COVID pandemic. I had a reporter ask me, do I think aerosols can go 6 feet? And I thought of this, which shows aerosols going all the way around the globe. They play a really important role in our weather, where water falls, how much falls. We showed that dust from Africa changes the snowfall in California by 60%. And so, they just have a profound effect on water supply as well as human health. And there's many examples, biological examples that we've been focusing on a lot from a health perspective are things like viruses and bacteria. So in 2010, I became the director of the National Science Foundation Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment, or CASE. And I continued to direct that for 14 years. I still direct it, but now the Center for Chemical Innovation part has been removed. But we still continue to work on this one problem, which has to do with how is the ocean affecting our health? And people don't really think about that. We know a lot more about dust, and we study dust coming out of deserts and all those different things, but nobody thought about the sea spray. They thought it was just salt. And we convinced NSF that there's a lot more that comes out than just salt, and we're going to move the entire ocean atmosphere into the lab, which we have here at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and which is shown at the bottom. That's our first wave channel, where we could induce phytoplankton blooms, we could break waves, and we could study what comes out of the ocean. As that video shows, aerosols from humans are everywhere, so it's almost impossible to go anywhere. You can't go anywhere on this earth and just study the ocean. So we moved it into the lab for this reason. So you might say, how hard is that? It was really hard, but it was really worth it. And basically it's not just sodium chloride, which is what people have been using to mimic the ocean forever. And so a drop of seawater contains all signs of life. The ocean produces over half of the oxygen we breathe. So it's like a forest underwater, and there's every component of life in that ocean. And so how do we replicate that in the lab? We work with oceanographers, we worked with marine biologists. This is the beauty of interdisciplinary work, which I can never stop doing once you get a taste of that, working with people from all different areas, working on things you know nothing about, and suddenly do. This is our current incarnation, and I invite people, if they would like to visit at some point. We have this massive, the world's, I think, largest ocean atmosphere simulator that just got launched in 2021, I believe. It's called SOARS. And this allows us to not just break waves, but we have hurricane force winds. We can make sea ice. It's 36,000 gallons of seawater, and we can control it. And so we can actually do sort of all the things that you would like to study outdoors, indoors. So this shows what's called the hydraulics lab at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And I'll just show you a quick peek. The blue is the wind tunnel. And if you look really quickly, you'll see waves breaking right below that plastic glass that's on there, or plastic top. This is my students with their instruments making measurements. So it's kind of like doing a field study in the real world. And so basically, it's a massive undertaking. People come from all over the world. It's now a facility that users can do the studies, and there's the magical waves themselves. So I talk about bubbles a lot. I talk about aerosols a lot, and this is the direct link to the point of this talk. Basically, that white stuff, those are all bubbles, and these waves have become, the key. There's a million ways to make sea spray incorrectly. There's only one way to make it correctly, like a breaking wave in the real ocean. And we wanted to simulate the real world, exactly. We didn't want to have any, so that we could actually use our lab results to explain. So here's a breaking wave in the SOARS, and you see all those bubbles. And when those bubbles rupture, you can see there's two mechanisms that take off. There's a film cap that ruptures and the spray goes off, and then there's a jet that comes up out of the center that also releases aerosols that have very, very different compositions, as we were able to show. And once you get it right, which took us 3 years, basically you start to see all kinds of biology. You see little things that look almost cellular, you see bacteria with phage inside of them, you see droplets with bacteria. Because the bacteria and all the organic goo, if you will, the proteins, things don't really want to be in the water, so they concentrate on this thin skin called the sea surface microlayer. And when those bubbles rupture, they get released into the air. And that's key for my talk today. So on the left shows the work we did to sort of understand the cycling of biology and how, if you induce a phytoplankton bloom, if you induce a toxic bloom, how does that affect the air? And so we did this, and we worked really hard to understand what gets out. And I will tell you, we did it through genomic sequencing. We're now doing RNA sequencing to look at the viruses. Only a certain fraction gets out, and it's very, very specific. But what about if you're in the real world, like here in San Diego, near the US-Mexico border, hint, hint. This just shows a massive amount of polluted water that is going into the ocean every day. Up to 80 million gallons of wastewater each day goes into our Pacific Ocean? Yes, here in California. So what gets out? Which pollutants get out from the water? Which pathogens get out? And then how far do they go? So this had long been considered a water problem, a beach problem. Just don't go to the beach that day. Just don't go surfing that day. But in fact, once it hits the air, it can travel all the way across San Diego. As I showed in the very first movie, it can travel very, very long distances. So now the exposure route and the exposure process becomes important for a lot more people than just those living at the border, which turns out to be important because just those living at the border had been being largely ignored. This is a massive environmental justice issue. So basically, we've been doing measurements there, looking at sort of the microbes that get out of the ocean. And this last year, in 2024, this is the Imperial Beach Pier, which is the most southern city along our coast. This is one of my students. And there started to be coverage, finally, because it's kind of been a hidden problem, which is shocking to me. And so basically, they kept talking about how far does the ocean go? Who's going to be affected if they go to the beach? And I basically came along and said, but you inhale more air than anything, and we don't filter our air. We filter our water before we drink it, but we don't filter our air before we breathe it. Go figure. And so it's, basically we can shut down the beach when the water is polluted, but we don't tell people not to breathe. So it's a little catchy. So this shows some pictures of the area. This region is called the Tijuana River Estuary. It's right at the border, as you can see in this picture. 3/4 of the world lives within 30 miles of the ocean, very reachable by anything that would get out of that water. The bottom left-hand figure shows the pollution that goes into the ocean. And we did a study. It started in 2017 with the oceanographers at Scripps. It was just, we piggybacked, and this is where philanthropy let us launch into this new area, where we looked at where does that pollution go? Where do sewage outfalls go? Where does pollution that runs into the ocean go? And people just thought, the ocean's vast. You've ever heard the term solution is the dilution? No. So dilution is the solution to pollution, right? No, it is not. It can be if that pollution goes out into the ocean, but what we were able to show using a pink fluorescent dye was that if it gets trapped in the surf zone, think waves, think bubbles, those get launched, and we detected those aerosols all over San Diego County. So this shows a zoom out of that whole region, shows right where the river is going in. This is pictures of my students doing measurements in this area. We published a paper, which I'm not going to spend much time on, in 2023, which kind of woke people up, I would say, because we showed that up to 3/4 of the bacteria you breathe in the air in Imperial Beach come from that polluted water. And basically nobody had even thought of it. We did it through genomic sequencing, so it was tracing. It was directly linked. Nobody could argue. They tried, but we were right on that one. Then we went further, and we said, what about the chemicals? There's a lot of chemicals in wastewater. This is a combination of raw sewage and industrial waste. So we found drugs, illegal and not illegal. We found methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, airborne, in the air, in that region. We sampled it all up and down the coast, and we could detect smaller and smaller amounts as you moved away from the river. Again, this was in March. Last September, we took a little pivot. We decided we'd been going during the rainy season when at that point there's millions, there can be more than 1 billion gallons of water in one day that flows through that river. 1 billion. And so we kept going during the rainy season when it's very dilute. So we decided, let's go when it's dry season. Dry season means in California, there should be no water. It should not be flowing. And so we heard that the community was squawking very loud, that their lungs were burning, they were having heart problems, they were having mental problems, sleep problems. They were screaming, really, and it stunk. It stinks beyond your worst imagination. And they were not being heard. So we decided to go down. We went in August, as I say, during dry season. At this point, we get there, it's supposed to be dry. It's not a river. It's not a river. It's wastewater. 40 to 80 million gallons were flowing, only at night, secret dumping. So, basically industries on the other side are dumping in there at night, and they only turn on the flow. They're regulating the flow on the Mexican side, and they turn it on only at night. And the odor reports were shooting out the roof. And so, at this point, I study aerosols. Aerosols don't smell. but gases do. So we said, what are the gases? And this was a pivot for us. So we went, this is kind of a little bit busy, but just to make the point, we went to the coast, where we've always gone. We put our mobile lab there, we started making measurements, didn't see much. This shows when the winds were blowing off the ocean, the blue part, strong winds off the ocean, no hydrogen sulfide gas is the key tracer for sewage. That's the stinky rotten egg smell. It's also a toxic gas. It was the first nerve agent used during World War I. And so basically, you see that when the winds aren't very strong, so closer to the center, you see red. That's high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide, the highest concentrations of hydrogen sulfide. And it's coming from land. So we talked, my students were wise. They talked to the community. The community said, what are you doing? Why are you at the coast? We'll always make our measurements at the coast. They said, the smells are over here, along the river. Who would think that a river could, I didn't think a river could be putting out more stuff. So we moved over to the river, and we talked to the community and found out all of their issues. They visited us every day to tell us their issues. And so this just shows a map of the area where we were doing our sampling. It shows, basically we started at Border Field, which you see is down by the border. And the key point is what is now referred to as a hot spot. And it's zoomed in on there, and you see this very telltale white foam. And so this you can see is very far inland, but it's the river that is flowing, and then ultimately, I showed you, dumps into the ocean. So this is the spot. It's not the whole river that causes the problems we've learned, surprisingly. This was a huge discovery at the time. There is a point where the wastewater is coming along, and it gets forced through these pipes to get under a road. And when that happens, you get all this turbulence. And that turbulence are those wonderful bubbles that I've been talking about. That basically leads to nearly 100% transfer of aerosols, as well as these toxic gases that are dissolved in the river. There's such a big foam patch there that you can see it in the bottom right-hand corner from space. That is not normal, and certainly not something we would expect in the United States, for sure in California. So it's a shocker. So basically, hopefully this shows, whoops. Let me see, I want you to see the source. It worked before. Do you guys know why the video's not working? I hear it. Oh, you could see it. Oh, I can't see it. Whoopsie, sorry. Okay, there you go. Oh, you can see it. Okay, I can't. Okay, I'll believe you. All right, so basically this just shows the turbulent spot and why it's turbulent. And then you see, as you zoom out, you can see all the foam. And this is the stinkiest air that burns your lungs and gives you a headache that doesn't go away for days, and also gives you skin rashes. So we wear, as you see in the next slide, my students all wear biohazard suits anytime we're near this spot. And so we went to the river, we sampled river water. We also continued to sample the ocean because it's still some source because the river water goes in there. And what we did was we collected water samples everywhere and air samples everywhere to compare, where is this coming from? And so basically, hydrogen sulfide, coming back to that, I'd never measured hydrogen sulfide in my life, but this turned out to be a good thing to be measuring. We went to that hot spot. The nearest neighborhood is called Nestor, and it's in San Diego. And this is where the community was really complaining. Most of the complaints came from there. You can see the red lines, that's hydrogen sulfide. The spikes are at night. To calibrate you, they reach over 4,000 ppb. What's typical urban air? Less than 1 ppb. At the river, where people are horseback riding and birding, we detected over 20,000 ppb. And no one had said a word. So we started this on September 1st. September 2nd through 4th, we saw it started rising every night, only at night. It actually reacts away during the day, little known point, but the big source is at night. So September 5th, we decided we better tell the public health department. We had a meeting with the task force. I presented the results. They said nothing. They just looked at me. Next day, people woke up and were very distraught. Community members were there, and they're like, I can't believe they didn't say a word. They're still not going to help us. So we held a press conference and decided, and I had no idea, by the way, what we were getting into, to be honest with you. I'd never done it. The mayor says, Mayor Paloma Aguirre, she says, let's hold a press conference with your data. I'm like, okay, whatever it takes. At this point, I was so attached to this community. And we took our data. I get there. I pull in the car. There's, it's a classic movie scene. And there's just all these, cameras and, microphones shoved in my face as soon as I get out of the car. I tell you, I had no idea what I was getting into. But I went along with it and showed our data, and we alerted the public since others were not going to do so. This is September 9th, 2024. Our theory at this point was it's the turbulence. It's when the river's flowing that's a problem. If we could cut that turbulence, it should go down, right? So, surprise, surprise, the next day, they stopped the river. They turned off the river. Isaac kept telling me on my headstone it's going to say she stopped a river. So yeah, they stopped the river. And, basically, again, the wastewater, they diverted it. They kept it in Mexico, dumped it on the other side of the border. And so what do you think happened to the hydrogen sulfide? I have it covered just for the excitement here. Do you think it went down? It was amazing. They helped us do the world's best atmospheric chemistry experiment ever. They thought they were tricking us, but they just did this. Like if I'd asked them, could you, run the river and then turn it off so we can see if that's the problem? They would never have done it, but they did it. And so the really cool thing, and probably one of the best, am I getting behind? I better be fast? Okay. She told me 25. She told me 25.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'll go fast. So I'm not going fast. But anyway, this is the coolest figure of my entire career. These are the odor complaints versus the hydrogen sulfide. Our correlation, 1 would be perfect, 0.92 is pretty darn perfect. So we validated the community voices, and they were definitely thrilled. And this is, again, probably the figure that I'm the most proud of. It's been labeled the number 2 most endangered river. It is the largest current public health crisis in the United States. The impacts extend across San Diego. It is Flint, Michigan on steroids because it has sediment, it has water, it has air. There's not a fish alive in this river. It's incredible. So we published the paper in Science that was published last August, but it's just a beautiful, now I'm really hooked because it's like a beautiful thing you can do when everybody works together and when you work with the community, and we did that. Now they have toxic gas signs just like toxic beach signs, which has never happened anywhere else in the US. This is the foam. This is just recent. It was 10 feet deep. We couldn't sample the river. Again, this is not normal, except in India. All their rivers and their lakes for the same reasons. And so I'm going through fast, but I just want to make the point. This is a local problem. We're figuring out how to deal with it. We're sampling like crazy. We have not stopped. The community keeps saying, please don't leave. We're not leaving as long as we can afford to stay there. But 80 to 90% of all wastewater is discharged and dirty, and it affects everyone globally. So big story. We are pushing towards doing airborne surveillance of wastewater and using machine learning to sort of look at, how we can link these different aerosols, the viruses, the bacteria, fungal spores, look at the global circulation like we do for other types of aerosols, and link that with health. I just want to quickly thank those that have done this work. There's a big crew behind me, or I would not be standing here. And I want to make a comment that, we were allowed to keep going during this crazy government situation with funding. Our federal funding has all dried up, and we had philanthropy. Thank God, because we didn't leave. They thought we were leaving. They were waiting for us to leave to turn back on the river, and we are still there. So with that, thank you for listening, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Kim. We'll take one. Thanks so much, Kim. I think we'll take one question.
Thank you
Quick
very
question.
much. Rich here from Indiana. Thank you for terrifying us.
We got it under control.
It sounds like we're suggesting we all leave immediately and go to other parts of the country. On the other hand, there's a solution. We just apparently stop the ocean.
The river. The solution is to not put the stuff in the river in the first place. There you go. That's the solution. Source control is always the first rule, and for some reason, that's not happening. So no, it's much easier just to not dump it in the first place. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.